Hello, and welcome to my showcase presentation for Advanced Design in the MALET program. My name is Sean Hoppel, and I'm in my final semester in the MALET program at SUNY Empire State College. The topic of this showcase will be using the Cornell method of note-taking with Sonocent Audio Note Taker. In order to discuss this, I felt that there is some necessary background information. Mainly, what is the Cornell method for those that are not familiar with it? What is Sonocent Audio Note Taker? And then ultimately, the task at hand, how do you use or adapt Audio Note Taker to be compatible with the Cornell method? So for the very first part of this showcase, what I want to talk about is the Cornell method. So there are a couple prevailing theories out there about how to take good class notes, but one of the strong contenders theoretically is the Cornell system, which actually originated in the 50s at Cornell University. And basically what that involves is leaving space on your page for what they call a cue column, or a keyword or vocabulary column. Sometimes this column is referred to with a number of different names. But basically you're leaving a space on the left side of the page blank, and you're not writing in that while you're in class. You would take your notes as normal in the notes pane. You can see that here on the screen. And you would leave a row at the bottom, which is called the summary row, also blank in class. So the only part you're writing in is the part that would be where the notes go. Ultimately, what will happen is after class, you will extract information from each page into the cue column. You'll extract out main ideas, vocabulary, and any questions that are either answered by your notes or questions that are posed by the notes, things that you need review or that you need to look up or understand in order to understand what's happening on the page. And then you would synthesize the work that you're doing in the cue column with your original notes into a summary, which is basically one sentence or a very brief version of everything that's happening on that page. Ideally, when it's time to study for an exam or for a final exam, you would be able to just study each summary and then kind of build your way back up if you needed more information. If the summary wasn't enough, you'd go to the cues, and if the cues weren't enough, you'd go back to the full notes to try to remember what was going on that particular page of notes. So this system is well established, but in kind of the modern age, the 21st century, classrooms and lectures are changing, and some students are not even using pen and paper. They're using their laptops, and maybe this system kind of goes out the window. But there's a tool that is meant for note-taking assistance that I think could actually be compatible with this method, which, for many, many years was the top method of taking superior notes. So let's switch over to Sonocent Audio Note Taker and take a quick look at that. So let's see, I've got that right here. What we have here is a typical sample presentation. This is actually the presentation that is supplied with the software. I happen to think it's a really, really good demo, so I use it a lot. I use it in my trainings with students that have disabilities at the University of Buffalo. The topic of this presentation is the ethics of tea. And you can see here there are three panes that are active right now. The images pane has the slides, so what would be equal to the PowerPoint slides that your professor would actually put up on a learning management system or in some way provide to you before class. The center column is the text column. That would be where your notes would go. And in terms of using this with the Cornell method, this would be the notes pane, or that, the large portion of the page that you would normally take notes in. And then the audio portion. And the way that this works is it records and automatically chunks the audio into these visual bars based on natural pauses in speech. So each one of these is a sentence. Like if I
We're
were to
going
hit
to
play
consider
here.
the ethical implications.
And this is where she would take a natural pause here in this break. So over here on the right hand side of the screen, we have the different chunking colors. So for example, if I designated this opening sentence as important, by clicking here it turns it magenta, and now I know this is important. So when it's time to study, I could use that chunk specifically. So this is really the claim to fame of the software, is that it allows you to sync up slides with the audio that's being said by the professor about that slide and allow you to type some notes. But I'd like to take this software one step further, and that is using this with Cornell Notes. So how am I going to do that? Down here in the bottom are these panes. This is the bottom left, And you can see here that they're green, so that means these three panes are enabled. There's another pane here that is disabled, and I'm going to go ahead and enable that. Now we have the reference pane. What this was originally designed for was for faculty that would be using this software to basically give their lecture. This is not only to aid students in note-taking, it's also designed with some features that are amenable to faculty giving a presentation. This was supposed to be a one-stop shop solution for both faculty and students to give their lectures. That was the original design. But by default, the references pane is disabled because it's more often used by students than it is by faculty. And indeed, if students were giving a presentation, they could also use the references feature here to have, important facts about whatever slide they're talking about, the actual sources, in case there's a question that interrupts their presentation or during question and answer phase about a particular slide or fact. They can go back and maybe they have access to some information that the viewer can't necessarily see, so they could answer a question or something like that. There's a similar feature in Microsoft PowerPoint and other common presentation tools. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of usurp this and use this in a different manner than from what it was designed to do. We're going to use the reference pane as the Q column, which was, if you'll recall from that Pinterest diagram, the Q column, I actually think I can bring it back up again, is the left-hand side here, and that's meant for the main ideas, the vocabulary, and the questions. So that's what's going to go in the references pane, and that can be hidden and brought back as needed. So let's see, from this we could say, this is about the ethics of tea, so what about labor costs? Forgive my slow typing, but things of that nature, and you could look up key terms. Fair trade is a big one, so maybe define fair trade, things like that. That would come up from the context of the audio. And you would go ahead and look up those answers, and then in order to create the summary, what you would do is actually import the audio and add it to the slide, so it would be the bottom of the slide, and you can actually code it as summary. That's what the black coding is here. There is an example of this in the second slide that I'm actually going to show you here. So right here, this is an audio summary that has been uploaded by a student after refining their notes and listening to the playback. They picked out all the parts that were important, as you can see here from the magenta. Those were all the individual sentences that the student indicated were important to remember, important for examination, and then they distilled that into a synthesized thought about it. So again, just to reiterate, the way that you use Cornell with this software is that you enable the references pane, you use that as the Q column, which is normally on the left of the paper version of the method. You would listen to your notes, take your full notes, distill it down, make your definitions, pose your questions, go ahead and answer them, and then distill that down into an audio summary that you would speak out and import into the software. And you might ask, how would you do that? Well, the simplest method is to use a digital recorder and just click the import button here and import audio. It's the very first option. And then you would just navigate to the file on your computer. That's the most common way to do that. And in fact, if you have access to this software at your university, you most likely have the same access to a digital recorder that you could basically loan out in conjunction with the software in order to make that happen. But if you were an individual student that was using this without it being supplied to you, perhaps as a reasonable accommodation or through a student success office of some kind, or even honors programs or any of the kind of typical players in higher education that would offer this software. There's a number of places students can get access to software like this. But if you are on your own, it's not terribly cost prohibitive. You would probably want to invest in both this and a digital recorder for that summary part, because really that's very important. That proves the mastery of the material or the synthesis. It's kind of that final link in using Cornell with this software. Not to say that the software doesn't have benefits without that final piece, but in order to successfully adapt the Cornell method to use with this, there needs to be that summary component. So that is basically how you would use this tool with the Cornell method. So the last part of this showcase, I actually want to go into the course that I've designed. So all of this I'm giving you now is background information to the actual project that I'm submitting, which is a course sites um, designed training program. It's very specific, so there's not a whole lot of material in this because the point is to teach one relatively simple task. But here we are in the course. I'm currently on the lessons module, and there are the 3 lessons. I figured the background information that you would need, just like I did for the earlier part of the showcase, the Cornell method, so we have some background here, and a lesson on the Cornell method. And all these videos are closed captioned and they're open source under Creative Commons licenses, so these are just pooling resources that already exist. I have in here a quiz. I'm going to try to open that up and hopefully it will cooperate. Let's see. Yes, begin. I just want to show you an example. It is a multiple choice quiz. Here we go. Meant basically to just make sure that the students have retained the very important parts of the video. In this case, where is the summary section located, things like that, so that they could recognize if they're looking at a template of the Cornell method, that they are in fact looking at the Cornell method and what each part means and what's supposed to go in each part, just as an example. So there's a quiz after the first and second section. There is not a quiz after the final section or lesson, if you will, because there's a reflective assignment, a written assignment after that. So here's the second lesson, which is Sonnets and Audio Note Taker, and there's a series of very short videos here. It looks like there's a whole lot of videos, but they're only about 2 minutes long each, and they're separated by theme. So one focuses on capturing the audio in the lecture, one is editing, annotating, and changing that audio. That's all about chunking, which is very important. Third is the review capability, so how do you use this to study and to improve your notes? And the fourth is about engagement, and that involves uploading your PowerPoint slides into the software, importing and exporting, including importing your audio summaries if you were to use this with Cornell. There's a second quiz after the audio note taker portion. And then the final lesson is using the Cornell method, which I just went over with you all in Sonocent. So that's basically the content of the course. And here there are discussions. So there's a discussion forum, and it would be instructor moderated. So I would be in here working with the students who are taking this training program, so they're not out on their own, kind of directing the discussion. In order to help build insights about what the software is supposed to be doing and make sure that they have grasped all the important parts from the video and they weren't just kind of playing it in the background while they were playing Minecraft or something like that. And lastly, reflective writing piece, which is supposed to tie all the pieces together in the training program so that they walk away knowing how to use the Cornell method with this software and also how to get a hold of this software. A lot of students also don't know that this is usually available either from an accessibility resources office or a student success office, EOP. Again, honors, a lot of the sciences, even departments will offer this software because it really works very well for STEM courses in particular. So basically my showcase is this final product, this course site, which I hope to expand. This is actually very, very preliminary. This will be my final capstone project for MALET. Over the course of the summer, I'm going to flesh this out into a full course that can be offered with modules and that look at a number of assistive technologies, not just this note-taking aid, which can be used with Cornell method, but also speech-to-text software, text-to-speech software, literacy softwares, to basically create a package for a transitioning student that would address basically any area of functional limitation that a student could possibly have coming into their first year at university. So I want to thank you all. If you have any questions or concerns, you can email me. My email is my name, so Sean.Hoppel, Hoppel, at gmail.com. So again, that's just my name, Sean.Hoppel, at gmail.com. Thank you so much for your time and for your attention.